Today on the Skid Factory, we're putting the I back in VIP.
But that says President, that doesn't say VIP.
It says VIP there.
VIP stands for Very Important Person.
I thought it was stood for voraciously injected petrol.
What?
Makes sense to me. Welcome back to the Skid Factory. Since we left you last time, we've been feverishly pulling old junk out of this engine bay. We got the wiring loom out late last episode, I think, and I've since opened it up, followed all the wires, found out what these relays do, well mostly, some of them I found out what they do, via the engine loom, and stripped out the original engine management system. It's in the bin over here. It's very bulky and complicated, but not very smart at the same time. So we're going to just delete all that, and I've just taped up all this. This is the car part of the loom, so they did mix it in with part of the car loom. So I've just deleted all that, got rid of any relay connections that don't need to be there, and then taped it all back up again. So we're going to put this back in the car as it is. These are leftover stuff that was connected to the engine management system. I don't know what they are yet because you can't get a wiring diagram or anything for a car like this. It's, you know, very rare and very old, so we probably won't need too much of it anyway. The only thing we've got to concentrate on doing is trying to get the cruise control to work, which is just speed and rev input, so we'll figure that out as we go. So that'll go back in. This was very difficult to get out, and Woody's probably feeling it today from crawling upside down underneath the dash.
The only thing I was worried about is like breaking something under the dash there because, as you said,
because we can't go down to the wreckers and get another one.
No. I think Mark said there's like 8 of these in Australia. There's probably another 8 in Japan left.
No pressure, bro.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's ready to go in. That's going to be by itself. It's got nothing to do with the engine management system. And I'm going to mount the Elite ECU in the engine bay. There's plenty of space for it over on this other side where we've removed some other strange modules that do weird things that they shouldn't need to do. So they're all gone. So perfectly fine to mount that in the engine bay. It is water resistant, etc, etc. Just needs to be away from direct heat. I have modified the throttle body, or this big assembly here. As I talked about, I was going to make this forward idle control work. This is off an AU.
Wasn't an EL?
No, I got an AU one because I could get a connector for it. So I welded up the holes that used to be lowered down, just digged them up, ground it flat, remarked it, drilled and tapped, done deal. Looks like it's supposed to be there. Did a bit of schminging over here to make stuff fit, all good. The throttle body itself is fine. Doesn't really need any mods except for these plugs that I've had to put in. There was a really primitive water temperature sort of bimetal valve that allows a massive air leak when the engine's cold. So engine's cold, it just revs up because it has a big air leak between here and there. We don't need that anymore because we've got proper idle control. So they're just going to get plugged off. The thing has already been removed because it had a carburetor on it, so it's got a plate over it already. I've added a variohm sensor here. These are multi-directional. The kind of main purpose for them is that you can operate them on any direction throttle body, which most TPSs you can't. They used to have old flip over ones that used to work on Bosch stuff, but I don't think you can buy them anymore. But these are good. D shaft, all I did was make a plate to hold it, well, to plate off the original switch type sensor that was on there, and then a couple of more holes to mount that. So I've wired all these bits and pieces, inlet air temperature, and this. This only came with a flying lead, like not a plug-in pin, which I hate, but it's all you can get it at. This sensor here comes with wires hanging out of it, so I just made a little sub loom to go with it with a Deutsch DTM connector, so that'll just bolt on, good to go. Injectors, we've pulled them out of the box. It was hard to get them out for a start because they're rotted in there. Dug the rails out of the boot. They're ugly as sin, but they appear to be in good condition and not leaky, so they go back on. So we just got to change all these over. This is how they mount. So that mangled looking old thing there is actually an O-ring, like a big square section O-ring. This is a new one, and there's a little cutout in there, and this plate just squashes the O-ring and kind of just clamps it in there. So probably not the greatest thing in the world, but that's probably why they don't use them anymore. So now we're ready to bolt some stuff on, pull those injectors out, sort of seal all the engine up, then I'll look at the distributor, and after that we'll start wiring.
How good are stock injectors?
Not good.
After dealing with a few stubborn injectors, some O-ring grease is applied to the new items before being fitted. This will ensure they won't end up seized in the manifold like the old ones.
Got the two distributors here. This one's out of the vehicle. You can see it's just an 8-pole Bosch electronic distributor. This one is a 8+1 Hall effect. So we're going to replace them one with the other. This is how they've adapted it to fit. That's a sleeve that brings the size up to the size of the Nissan distributor bore. And this adapts it to the right length, and also has that's the oil pump drive there, so that goes on there, that goes on there, and it all worked, so that's a good thing. I'm going to just get a blanking cap made for it just to cover up the internals, and that should be distributor done. We put the camera down for a little bit and got stuck into some plumbing and mounting of things. The injectors are all plumbed up, so it's all hose clamps everywhere. The original regulator there, that should be fine. It seems to work okay. New hoses, new filter. I just matched that up at the local parts shop. It's actually a Commodore filter now, but close enough. All the lines replaced. They're all pretty crusty and old and like actually rock hard. I'm surprised they lasted as long as they did. We've found an ECU placement spot. As we said, it's fine to put these in the engine bay as long as they're nowhere near, ridiculous heat, so don't, bolt it onto your exhaust housing. Makes the wiring short. There's a bunch of There's ignition here because the coil used to be there, and there's a bunch of other stuff here I can probably tap into. It had some sort of weird module that we're not sure what it was that I've removed, so the ECU doesn't need a lot. This engine's simple, so it's got the simplest ECU. I found the rods for the throttle. It had an elaborate setup on it. It's now just got the original throttle setup, so that's a win. It was buried in the box full of old bits. So we're nearly ready to start wiring it. We've got mount some coils. Got some brackets for the LS2 or LS3 coils from Muscle Garage. So these normally lay flat on the top of an LS engine, so these brackets allow you to just sort of collect them into groups of 4 or 6, some of them are 6-cylinder ones, and then we just mount them. One side they're going to be on the valve cover because there's room over here, and on this side they're going to be down here because there's too much filler caps and breathers and stuff on that valve cover. So that's all good to go. We've got a Dizzy that we've converted over from the old Dizzy to the new one, so we're ready to throw that in and get stuck into some wiring.
LS coils are a common upgrade when converting to electronic fuel injection or upgrading standard items in higher horsepower applications. They are commonly available, compatible with aftermarket ECUs, and also have a wide range of mounting bracket options.
As I said earlier, we're using a Haltech Elite 550, and I thought I'd quickly explain the rationale behind that. It is an 8-cylinder engine with port injection, so I guess the go-to would be something like a 950 or a Elite 2000 or 2500. However, you can run a port injected 8-cylinder engine on a 550 which only has 4 ignition and 4 coil outputs. It works perfectly fine and they tune up very nicely. So I thought we'd just go through and show you what the differences are between the different types of ECUs. So you could probably sort of narrow it down to the single connector ECUs, which are kind of probably a newer product, as in the last few years. Obviously aimed at a more budget approach, which is what we're doing here. So it's only got one plug. That's what the single connector means, whereas you have dual connectors, so there's 2 plugs, and then a 4 connector, which is Millsy spec. So the 550 is the base model. It's got 4 injector outputs and 4 coil outputs. So that's your basic control over your coil, your spark and your injection system. So that can be used on a 4, 6 or 8-cylinder. You just use paired or semi-sequential injection and waste spark on a V8. The 750 is designed more specifically for engines like 2Js and 1Js and RBs. It is sequential 6 sequential spark, so coil and plug. It also has variable cam timing control, so that's kind of the bonus that you get with that. So it's sort of designed to be able to control your 1JZ VVTs and that sort of stuff straight out the box. The 950 is a 8 injection and 4 coil. So these are kind of using the same chassis, I'd call it, platform, but they're swapping the outputs around. So they're adding a couple of injectors on the 950 and taking away a couple of coils compared to the 750. So they all have sort of certain purposes, but in our case we can use the 550 because this is a very simple engine and it doesn't have any cam timing control or anything like that. It's very basic, so the 550 will run it sweet. If you wanted to get fancy, then you have to drop down to the dual connector ECUs, which is sort of the traditional Haltech stuff from way back. The Elite 1000 is 4 injectors, 4 coils, and it's got a H bridge, so it can control a stepper motor, so a GM stepper motor. So the H bridge is sort of an extra complication. The 1500 has the same 4 injectors, 4 coils. It's got a H bridge, but it's also got drive-by-wire control. So that's what the difference with the 1000 and 1500. So the drive-by-wire control is quite a significant change, and it does require a lot of processing power. So 2000 and 2500, same thing, except it's got 8 injectors and 8 coils. So it's got H bridge on 2000 and drive-by-wire and H bridge on the 2500. That's the basic stuff of it, but it's also got lots more control. There's heaps more ins and outs. You can control air conditioning and you can control just all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of SPIs, so speed inputs. They're significantly advanced over the single connector, hence the extra connector. Lots more wires to do lots more things. The Nexus R5 is a new one. That's an ECU and PDM built into one, so it controls. You can control the entire car from right down to the headlights and indicators with that ECU. It's got 4 connectors on it. It basically does everything. It's got 18 injectors, 12 coil. It's dual wideband, dual drive-by-wire. It's got everything. So it's basically the pizza with the lot. We're going to use one of them on Millsy's car, so I'm looking forward to that. So that's your basic rundown. As we said in the planning your project episode, don't just pick the most expensive one. You might not need it, and you're just wasting your time and wasting a whole bunch of wires that aren't going to get used. So you can go through something like this comparison chart that you probably, this comes in the box, but you can get that online, of course, and it's basically showing you all the different types. We have omitted the VMS, which is a spark control computer. We are going to use one of them shortly on a car, but it's just for spark, for carbureted engines. And there's pro plugins and all sorts of stuff like that we've omitted as well, but they're specific to certain vehicles, so we've left them out. All right, so the first thing we've got to think about when we're doing this wire up is the ECU works on inputs and outputs. So inputs are information required to process to work out what the output's got to be. So inputs are temperature, position and pressure. So we've got air temp, coolant temp, we've got engine position, which is your trigger and home or sync, and we've got manifold pressure. This is, as I said, this is a basic engine, so that's pretty much all we need. And then we've got outputs, so injection and ignition outputs and general purpose outputs, or DPOs, which we'd use for boost control solenoids, idle control, tacho, that sort of thing. So it's actually pretty simple. When you lay it out like this, we're going to make it even simpler, because the first thing I do is get rid of stuff we don't need. So they give you a whole bunch of things, that O2 inputs, we don't need that. I never use them. I only ever use wideband O2 because normal O2 is not much use. We've got internal map sensor, or external map sensor I should say. Yes, you can use that, but I never use it because it's got a 30 psi map sensor, or 29 psi internal, and it's much easier to use that, and it's much less likely to get damaged because it's contained inside the computer and not some cheap junk thing that you buy from a part shop. So I remove that, get rid of it. O2. There's a bunch of DPIs that we don't need. I just remove everything that we don't use, because it's just cluttering up your job, and making it look harder than it is. So we're going to get into that now. Don't forget your Bible. I accidentally threw out the one that goes with this loom, so I just got a 950 one. As I said, it shares most of the pin out except for the injector and coil. So write on here what you're using things for and keep it in the car for when the tuner needs to refer to it. Let's get rid of some stuff we don't need.
In this application, the ECU only requires 2 relays, which Alan is going to mount externally of the wiring loom and will recycle the Haltech fuse box for another project. Any other wires that aren't required are also de-pinned from the wiring loom and kept aside to also be recycled. Using new coil and injector connectors is always the best idea when wiring an ECU. Common items are readily available online in plug and pin kits. Existing plugs that can't be found should always be crimped using the correct tools rather than solder to prevent damaging older wires from excessive heat. Al tests the wiring loom with a multimeter to ensure he has paired the correct cylinders in a wasted spark and semi-sequential configuration.
Loom's all done apart from some power and a fuel pump relay. We'll get to that shortly. We've got the WB1 here, sensors over on that bank. Just got to join it up with the CAN wire. I ripped myself off so I couldn't just plug it in, but you get that. We've got coils here for this bank. We've got coils for that bank. All the injectors. You would have seen in the video that, or some footage that Woody took, that they are paired as in firing order. So wasted spark, multi-point, semi-sequential injection. So it works fine. We've got idle control here. It's a Ford unit. We've got air temp, coolant temp down there. Got your crank angle sensor in there. They're both Holden parts, so I hope that doesn't cause any issues. We've got a variohm throttle position sensor there, and there's not much else to it. It's pretty simple. I've got a bunch of spares here in this connector. They're just spare DPOs and stuff just in case. It doesn't have a tacho, but it does have cruise control, so I suspect I'll probably have to find whatever the speed signal wire is to hook it up, but we'll get to that once the engine's running. Got some stuff to do in the boot. It's got no fuel pump. It's just got like carbureted converted stuff in the back, so we'll sort that out. We'll make some leads and configure and get ready to fire up. That'll be next episode. Thanks for watching. Check out the merch store. Always updating. I believe there's some fancy going out shirts that Woody's going to wear to the clubs on there now. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and thanks for watching. See you next week.
I don't know what's in old wiring looms, but they're always, compared to a 1990s car that's buggered and broken.
It's probably lead or something.
Yeah.
Something that kills you.
True that.
Did you know that that's why the Mad Hatter went mad?
Because of lead?
Yeah, because he was a felt smith or whatever, and he used to make hats, and they go like this on the hat brim, and then they get lead poisoning and go mad.
Is that why you're mad?
I'm not a hatter. What is love? Yeah. What he don't hurt me. Whoa, 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 whoa. What is love? What he don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. Wastegate pipe, don't hurt me. You recording me still?